The headlines. Face masks are set to become compulsory in shops in England as the Prime Minister, or someone who looks like the Prime Minister, we can't be sure he's wearing a mask, made an announcement to clear up the confusion. However, many have questioned this decision, including one journalist who asked the Prime Minister why this was being introduced now if it's so important to save lives and not months ago. The Prime Minister responded, when asked to remove his mask and answer more clearly, the Prime Minister responded that to do so would break the law and put lives at risk. Well, I guess we can kiss our business goodbye, said a spokesman from a lipstick factory. This makes life hard for us too, said one supermarket checkout assistant. We see people shoplifting on our CCTV, but we can't catch them because they all look the same in masks. We also have this problem, said a local police constable. You try identifying a suspect from a description which simply says, man wearing mask. This is a gift to those who wish to keep their identity secret. Rumours that DC Comics were desperately trying to redesign the Batsuit to make it as mask COVID friendly as Marvel's Iron Man have been strenuously denied. My name's Andy, that's all fake news, and you're watching Alverstoke Antiviral. Well, I'm joined here now with Emily. Emily, it's great to see you. Hi.
Good to see you too.
Emily, how have you been in lockdown?
I've been fine. Yeah, I think just like everybody else, when it started, it was a little bit hard because now most of the parents who are not teachers, they had an extra job to do because of kids being home. And the first few weeks were a bit hard because I was trying to be a perfect teacher, which I don't think I was. I don't think I did a very good job. It ended up stressing me and stressing Caden.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, slowly and surely it's become better. We've had a good routine going, which was good. Yeah, and you know, as time went by, we've seen our friends, so things kind of getting better and better every day, which is actually good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so have you been working while teaching as well?
Yes. So yeah. So Caden wakes up at 6:30, which kind of distorts my day because the whole point was for me to wake up early and start a little bit early, do the more serious things earlier on before he wakes up. But now because of that, I have to give him something to do when he wakes up. So yeah, I had a few books that I bought a while back from Book People, Maths and English. So I tend to give him some exercises from that. So while I'm doing other bits and bobs, he's busy doing that. But when it comes to meetings, I have to let him watch television. That's because he won't have to ask me anything, because when he's working on something, calculating something or reading something and he's not sure of it, he'll always ask, and I try and avoid him asking me when I'm on a meeting. So yeah, it's been a learning curve, so we've ended up in a good place where we both know what's expected most of the times. It doesn't go well all the time, but yeah, most of the time, yes.
So have you mostly had to work just on your computer and do meetings like that?
Yes, so I work with HSBC and most of my work is computer-based because we deal with applications, and especially during this time where most of the staff can't see customers face-to-face. So we've had to accommodate quite a number of staff members just to allow them to be able to communicate to their customers through the different applications that we have in the bank. So it's been really busy. Most of it has been, yes, Zoom meetings because of training and replying to questions and things like that. So yeah, in a day I could have probably 3 hours of meeting. Not in one sitting though, but yeah. Yes. Not very good. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you've been working quite a lot and doing meetings for long hours, I suppose you must have found ways to refresh yourself as well.
Yes. So apart from studying with Caden, we've been taking breaks. So we started with, he didn't know how to ride his bicycle by beginning of lockdown. So I used that time to teach him how to ride his bicycle. And I can say he's the first person I've ever met who didn't have any scratch. Even after learning, yeah, he learned properly, and of course I was holding him the whole way. I think that's why he never got a scratch.
Oh, I see. Right, so you were managing him. So now he's speeding around the neighborhood, and
yeah. Oh, now we go everywhere. We go seafront, everywhere. So nowadays I run as he rides. I use him as he calls himself as my instructor.
Oh.
So, because when we are running and he's riding his bike, sometimes I tend to want to give up, and no, he doesn't give me the chance to do that. So he's kept me going. So that, in a way, for me, has been a good way to just relax, and because as we said, my work is on the desk, looking at a computer all the time. So that has been a breath of fresh air, running out there, seeing beautiful flowers, And somebody said it's good that lockdown happened during spring, where things actually spring out. So it's been good to just walk around or run around and see beautiful things that God has made that we normally just pass by and don't give a thought of it. So yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad he's been taking you out for exercise.
Yes.
A funny way of putting it, isn't it? But yeah. So, as a Christian, how have you been learning anything, or has God been teaching you anything, or has there been anything on your mind recently over the last few weeks?
Yes, I would say so. During this lockdown, there's a lot that's happened. As we all know, of course, the virus. After the virus, we had the Floyd thing going on in America with Black Lives Matter. And it just brought back some memories about something that Caden went through in school. And it weighed down on me for a while when we had all these things going on. As you know, things like this have a lot of emotions attached to it and things like that. But yes, as a Christian, that was the thing I wanted to make sense of it as a Christian, on what does the Word of God say about things like this? How should we react? How should we look at things like this? And sometimes, I read stuff and, most of it was negative and not Christian stuff, just, looking at everything as it was. And God encouraged me with a few verses from Philippians chapter 2. I'm just going to read a little bit. It says, "So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having same love, being in full accord and of one mind. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourself. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this in mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And that has been, whether it's through this Black Lives Matter or even lockdown as a whole with the virus, it's been a challenge and encouragement not to look at interests that are just for me. What do I want? God has been encouraging me to look out to see how I can help others, even though with the virus it's a bit hard to physically be in some places where you can be of help. But thank God that we can always pray, because it doesn't have to be help doing something for somebody that's physical. You can always pray for them. I've been far from home. We've had from our study group, Fiona, tell us about what's going on in Uganda, and sometimes we feel helpless. So just being reminded that you can put these people in prayer, pray for them, everything that's going on around the world, whether it's inequality or whatever it is, any kind of injustice that we see, it's all caused by sin, and praying about these things and hoping that at the end of the day, it's change of heart that's going to make everything good. And if nothing else, if nothing changes in this world, then we have a better place to look forward to. When Jesus comes, then we'll be in a better place with him, praising him. There'll be no difference. There'll be no black, no white, no rich, no poor, no Jew, no Gentile. So it's been a good thing to look forward to. And I feel God encouraged me with these words and also challenged me to do what I need to do while I'm on here.
Oh, great. Yeah, you're reminding me of other bits of Philippians as well, actually. I'm thinking of that bit near the end where he says, our citizenship is in heaven, and we await a saviour from there. And talks about Jesus' power to transform us. And he says, encourage each other with these words.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately he starts talking about what you were talking about in terms of worries. He says, don't be anxious about anything. And that's easy to say. So easy to say. But when you actually look at the problems that people are facing in their lives, there is a lot of baggage and problems and pain and sin and problems, and you just think, this is too big for me. I don't know what to do with this. And he says, don't be anxious about them, but present them to God, and God's peace will guard you. And it's I
like especially that verse, because unlike what we've been taught before, it's like pray about these things and God will give them to you. No, he says pray about them, and the peace, not the answer, the peace of God. So he gives you, it's almost like when you trust him, you just tell him about your problems and let him deal with it, and he gives you the peace to wait for his answer, whatever forms it comes in, because sometimes it doesn't come the way we anticipate it to come, but he gives us the peace, to wait for his perfect answer.
I think that's why prayer is so important in terms of people facing problems, people dealing with stress, people dealing with all sorts of stuff, because it's about trusting God and giving things to God, isn't it?
Yes.
Often we don't feel very peaceful, but why not prayer? And there's that great hymn, isn't there? Are you heavy laden? Take it to the Lord in prayer.
Yeah.
It's an oldie, but it's good.
It's relevant, very, very relevant still. Yeah. I find a lot of encouragement in hymns because they are more detailed they were quite full in terms of the message they brought forth, and that's why we can still relate to them even to this date, I think.
Do you have a favorite?
Favorite will be it is well. with
Oh,
my soul, because that's one of this. We used to sing it. It's been in our family from my grandfather to my dad and to us. So every time we used to meet, we used to sing about that. It is well with my soul.
well, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have it on the Sunday stream at some point.
Hopefully so.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Emily, lovely to chat, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye.
Well, today in Alverstoke Antiviral, we are looking at the book of Esther, a great short book in the Old Testament about an amazing rescue for God's people. Why is it worth reading? Well, not just because it's really gripping as a piece of storytelling, not just because it transports us to the ancient world, to a time and a place of barbaric luxury, with a king who is all powerful over 127 provinces from India to Egypt, with drunken parties and marital strife and young women being scooped up into harems to undergo 6-month-long beauty treatments. A world where a man would put up 10,000 talents of his own money towards a genocide against the Jews. There's intrigue. There are hangings or impalings. There are plots. There are moments where the tables are turned, and at the heart of it all is one very brave young girl in a horrible situation who risks her life to save God's people. This is the subject matter of the book of Esther. And this is what we're looking at. It's eye-poppingly different from the world of today. But the reason to read the book is not just from curiosity. The reason why you should take a look at it is because it speaks to us when we're tempted to give up on God and his promises. It speaks to us when we're tempted to give up on God and his promises, and we'll see why that is. Let me just run through the tale. So it starts in chapters 1 to 2 with the backstory of how Esther becomes the queen. It's set in the post-exilic period where the king of Persia, Xerxes, rules from 486 to 465 BC. So it happens during the book of Ezra, basically. And the backstory is this. First of all, you get the removal of the old queen, Vashti, who refuses to obey her drunken husband and so is de-queened. And it's easy to make moralizing applications and judgments from that, as many people do when they come to the books of the Bible. Oh, when we see someone do something, we copy the good and we avoid the bad. But to moralize in that way is not really to address the point of the story. The point of the story is not this is good or this is bad, although it is pretty bad, the whole situation. The point of the story is to show us that this enormously powerful king removes his queen. And so, chapter 2, a vacancy has arisen for a queen. And so they appoint a government commission tasked, no joke, with rounding up loads of beautiful young women and putting them all in a harem with some eunuchs in charge, and then make them undergo bizarre beauty treatments for ridiculous lengths of time. And then eventually, one by one, they are led to spend the night with the king so he can find one he likes. This is some sort of strange royal version of Tinder. And you can feel the feminist blood pressure rising even as I describe it. And rightly so, because it's a ghastly system. But again, the point is not to teach us moral lessons about rights and wrongs of this. The point is to show us how through this bizarre situation, a Jewish girl called Esther, who's related to a man called Mordecai, got swept up into this harem and got to be acquainted with the king, and actually was his favorite and became the queen. We're introduced to her in Esther chapter 2 and her protector Mordecai, who are Jews, but Esther is a very undercover Jew. Here's what it says, Esther 2:10, the New International Version. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her from doing so. So Esther is undercover in this royal system. That's important. So to survive, she's been encouraged to keep her identity as someone who belongs to God's Old Testament people secret. So this is the equivalent of a sort of undercover Christian, a Christian who would never want to admit they were a Christian publicly or let it be known that they believe in Jesus and things like the resurrection, because that would mean paying a price socially. That's Esther at this stage. She's undercover. But as it happens, she goes into the harem, she rises to become the queen, and Mordecai also, in chapter 2, exposes a plot to sue and saves the king from that. And that's all the backstory. It becomes important later, but it just lays the backstory for then the big issue in the plot in the book of Esther, and that is the threat from their enemy. And the enemy arises, and the enemy, boo-hiss, turns up in chapter 3. His name is Haman. Haman, and he's the new favorite civil servant of the king. And in chapter 3, he violently falls out with Mordecai because Mordecai won't show him any respect, and Haman gets very, very angry about this. And hopefully I can show you this. Basically, here's what happens. Esther 3, when Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. This is the big threat in the book of Esther. Haman wants to kill all the Jews. And at first glance, this looks like a bit of an overreaction. One man refuses to show him respect, and he goes from having a grudge against that one person to trying to wipe out an entire people. How does that work? Why does he react that way? And it's important to see that this isn't just a random grudge from Haman. This is an ancient and bitter hatred. Look what it says. It says he learns who Mordecai's people were. And that's when he makes the decision to try and go about this. Why? Because who is Haman? Haman is an Agagite. And what is an Agagite? An Agagite means a descendant of Agag. And who is Agag? You can put it into Bible Gateway, and you'll find out Agag, 1 Samuel 15, was a king of a nation called the Amalekites. Saul was tasked to wipe them out. And who are these Amalekites? Who are the Amalekites? The Amalekites are a people, a nation who are deeply, deeply hostile to the people of God. All the way back in Exodus 17, when Israel comes out of Egypt, they are attacked by the Amalekites, and Moses has to put his arms in the air and hold up his staff in order to win the battle. It's a very, very ancient feud between one people group and another, but it's not just Near Eastern politics, it's theological. It's about opposition to God and his purposes. This is Deuteronomy 25. Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. When you were weary and worn out, they met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind. They had no fear of God. When the Lord your God gives you rest from all your enemies around you in the land he is giving you to possess as an inheritance, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. And this shows us that this conflict, this might be why Mordecai reacted the way he did. It's a very old conflict, and it's not just politics, it's actually about God. Because the conflict between Mordecai and Haman is the conflict between a people who want to destroy God's people and people who want to worship God. And the text actually points out in Deuteronomy, it says they had no fear of God. The conflict, in fact, goes all the way back to Genesis 3, where there is an enemy of God, the serpent, and God says, I'm going to put enmity between the woman's offspring and the offspring of the serpent, and they will be in conflict with each other. A conflict will rage throughout world history and the Bible story between God and his people and Satan and the people Satan uses to attack God's people. So you get Cain and Abel, you get Jacob and Esau, you get Israelites and Amalekites, you get this conflict between God's people and their enemies. And this is an expression of that. This is why Haman is so murderously aggressive towards Mordecai, because he's got this instinct, and I think it's the same instinct you see in the Gospels when people attack Jesus and go after him and want him dead. It's the same instinct which drives persecution against the church worldwide today. It's an opposition to God. It's those who reject God's rule expressing offense and hostility towards those who accept God's rule. And so it is with Haman. His behavior shows him to be the offspring of the serpent theologically. And so we have this terrifying threat in the book of Esther. We have a powerful enemy with an ancient hatred to wipe out the people of God. and he gets state approval. He gets his plan approved by the Persian Empire. He personally donates all this money to the treasury to make it happen. And he sets a day. He casts a lot. That's important. He casts a lot to set the day when it's going to happen. And he's going to kill God's people. And that could have been the end of the Bible story. That could have been the end of the road for the promises of God, because God has promised to bless and save this world through his promises to Abraham's family. And if Abraham's family are wiped out, what becomes of the promises of God? So there is this threat of Haman. And chapter 5, Mordecai goes into mourning about this. And he lets Esther know, and he asks her to go to the king and ask for mercy. And here is the crunch moment, really, because what will Esther do? Esther has a decision to make. Remember, she's an undercover believer. The risk to her and to God's people is very great from Haman. He's going to wipe them out. He set the day. It's in the diary. But if she goes to the king, she is putting her life at risk. She says, if I just turn up uninvited, the rule is that I will be executed unless the king extends his golden scepter to me. That's the rule. So unless the king does that, the default is I'm going to be killed. I have no guarantee. So I'm putting my life in jeopardy if I turn up. And I haven't seen the king for 30 days. He's probably been with 30 other women since then. He's probably forgotten all about me. There's, a good reason to expect that, perhaps he won't respect me. Perhaps this will cost me my head. Remember, she's an undercover Jew as well. So even if he allows her into his presence and she says, look, I'm a Jew and my people are under threat, please spare us, there's a risk that she's just putting a big target on her chest for Haman. Perhaps as identifying as a Jew, she's putting herself in danger. It's enormously dangerous. Maybe she should just keep quiet. And here is the crunch moment. Here's what Mordecai says to her. He says to her, I'll show you this, because it's very important. There's a key moment in the book of Esther, Esther 4. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. And that is a statement that is filled with faith, isn't it? Famously, in the book of Esther, the name of God is not mentioned in the text, but he's definitely there. We see his hand positioning Esther, bringing her to the throne. We see him sovereignly overruling events in the background, behind the scenes. And here we see Mordecai saying, verse 14, if you remain silent, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise. Why does he say that? Why does he think there's going to be a rescue? Well, because he believes the promises of God. He trusts God, that God will save his people and that God will keep his promises. A rescue will come. This will not be the end of the line. God will save his people. But the issue is, will Esther be a part of that? Will she commit herself as one of God's people and put her neck above the parapet, trusting in a sovereign God? And look at the question at the end there. He says, who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? He trusts that maybe God has a purpose. Maybe God is in control and has put Esther there for that very reason. That's what the God of the Bible is like. He's in control and he's at work. And that's exactly what we as readers are meant to conclude. God has moved Esther to put her in this place so that she can take a stand at a certain moment in time, and God will use that to save his people. But the question for Esther is she going to do that? Is she going to take the risk? Is she going to put her neck on the line? Will she be a part of God's people, or will she go quietly? Because Mordecai believes, well, actually, if she keeps quiet, it's not going to work for her salvation. She's not going to benefit from this rescue. He says, you and your father's family will perish. So, in other words, will Esther take up her cross and seek to save her life and others' lives by risking her life? Will she blow her cover, imperil her own survival for the sake of God and his people? Will she see, verse 13, that the path of self-preservation and keeping quiet actually leads to death, for it will exclude her from God's people. Mordecai himself says she will not survive. And Jesus says whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. There's a calculation here, isn't there, that Esther has to make. Will she try to preserve her life and shrink back from standing up and identifying as one of God's people and trying to help others? Or will she take up her cross and risk losing her life to save it and many others? That's the calculation she has to make. Calculation that many have to make. In other words, does she see God and his promises as worth it? Is she brave? Does she have faith? Or will she shrink back? I wonder what you would do in that situation when the chips are down. What does Esther do? She takes the plunge. She says, I will try. I'll go to the king, and if I perish, I perish. And guess what? Amazingly, it turns out to be the right decision. She survives. The king lets her into his presence. And then in the time it takes for her to set up a couple of meals to actually broach the subject with the king, amazingly, the king has a dream, and he can't sleep, and he reads the records, and he remembers that Mordecai foiled this plot. And he remembers that just in time to save Mordecai's life when Haman turns up on a mission to kill him. And in a deliciously ironic scene, Haman actually has to honor Mordecai for what Mordecai has done with a sort of fixed grin that his enemy is being honored. And then amazingly, when Esther invites the king and Haman to dinner, she makes her plea, she begs for her people. She says Haman is the one who is coming after her, and the king is entirely on her side. The tables are turned on Haman in dramatic fashion, and you can just imagine his face. It's a very theatrical book if you go and read it. And it's Haman who is killed. And on the allotted day of the massacre, a royal edict goes out, allowing the Jews everywhere to defend themselves, and it's their attackers who are killed and defeated. And we're told many people actually become Jews in the book of Esther because they want to side with God's people. So it's a total rescue and a total role reversal from impending doom to survival. And of course, none of this is by accident. This is God. This is God at work, the God who is not named in the text, but whose hand is at work, bringing about salvation and rescue for his people as he promised. How does it happen? It happens to a sovereign God who cannot be defeated, no matter how bad the enemy, no matter how hostile the opposition, and no matter how great the risk. God will save his people through his sovereign plan and through the self-sacrificial risk-taking of Esther. That's so important, isn't it? Because Esther sets us up for the gospel. Esther is in some ways a foreshadowing of Jesus. She paves the way for another rescuer who would save God's people from destruction at the risk of his own life, who took up his cross literally and went to the cross in our place to save us from destruction, no matter the cost to himself. He did not try to preserve his life. He laid down his life for others. And that's what Esther foreshadows. And she points us to the gospel. Another way Esther foreshadows the gospel is that Esther shows us people becoming Jews, siding with the people of God, as we see in the New Testament as well, when people realize actually this is God saving his people here and we want to be part of it. And following this God and joining his people as one of his people who trusts in him is the path to life. That's what people see in Esther. And that's the invitation of the gospel to all of us, to join the people of God, whatever our background, and to commit to this God and trust him for his promised rescue, which looks like it's self-destruction. It looks like a steep and narrow path, but actually it's the way to life. Thirdly, Esther foreshadows the gospel in another way by showing us the victory of God. You might know the Jews set up a special festival in Esther chapter 9 to celebrate these events, the festival of Purim, the festival of lots, because the lot was cast by Haman for the day of destruction. But God brought about this rescue. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, that God wins. God will win in the end. It doesn't look like it for most of Esther. It looks like Haman has got this in the bag. But in the end, God wins. The seed of the serpent is defeated, hoisted by his own petard in gruesome fashion, and the people of God are saved. That is what is going to happen. That's what Esther shows us. God wins, and God will win in the end. Do you believe that? That's the question. Do we believe that God will win in the end? Are we hedging our bets? Here's the real freight of application for us, I feel, in a culture where we're tempted to think we're on the losing side, and God and Jesus are not worth bothering with, and the promises of the Bible are not worth clinging to and trusting, and the teachings of the gospel are not worth standing up for, because it just makes you look like an idiot. It looks like social suicide. You're signing up to be a reject, a fanatic, a bigot. Why throw away your life and reputation like that at such a cost? Well, the answer is because you believe God wins. Do you believe that God is going to win in the end? And he is going to bring about a rescue for his people. A rescue that brings about the forgiveness of sins and the resurrection of the body and life everlasting for all who trust in him. Do you believe that's worth believing in and worth standing up for and worth taking up your cross for? There's a substantial cost to being a Christian, isn't there? In many countries, that includes violence and serious threats to life and bodily health. In this country, most of the time, it's a social cost, but a cost nonetheless. And we'll be tempted to stay undercover. We'll be tempted to be so far undercover that we're actually not living for Jesus at all. We're indistinguishable from our neighbours. And Esther says, don't you believe it? That's not the way to life. The way to life is to side with God, to trust his promises, to join his people, and to stick your neck out for him and for the salvation of others. Because God is sovereign and God will win. And that choice of Esther to stick her neck out at cost to herself not only anticipates Jesus, who stuck his neck out on the cross and risked his life and laid down his life for us, it actually foreshadows Christians as those who follow the crucified Christ. Just as Jesus carried his cross, so we are called to carry our cross and to not try to save our lives, but lose our lives for him and the gospel. And the question is, as we close, is that path worth it? Do you believe God will win in the end and it's worth it and that God will save his people? What would you do in Esther's shoes? As we finish, let me just read these words again from Mark 8. Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. So which way are you going to go? Do you believe that God will save his people and God wins? And will you take up your cross in following Jesus? That's the book of Esther. Thank you very much for watching and join us next time. And until then, stay close to Jesus and wash your hands.